ICE has been present at some airports alongside TSA operations, and there are 4 categories of travelers who may be affected. There is also one category of person who should seriously consider pausing travel until they have spoken with an immigration attorney. In this video, my goal is to explain who those 4 groups are, how they can be affected, and, more importantly, what you should know if you have to travel and what you should do when you arrive at the airport. As always, my purpose is to educate you on immigration, travel, and the practical realities people are facing right now. So let's get into it. Number 1. The first group that may be at risk at the airport right now is undocumented immigrants, or immigrants who already have a removal order. The concern with this group is that someone can be out of status, or even have an active removal order, and still have a state-issued ID, or even a valid real ID depending on where they live. In the past, people have sometimes been able to travel domestically with a valid ID and not run into any immediate issue. But if you are someone who is thinking about filing a case, or you already have a case pending, or you may even have a motion to reopen that has been filed, and you also have a removal order, this is not the time to assume everything will go smoothly just because you have identification. Once you are flagged during screening, you may be sent to secondary inspection, and that can create an opportunity for immigration enforcement to review your records more closely. In some situations, that may lead to further questioning or a transfer to immigration authorities for additional review. This has already happened to some of my clients. So if you fall into this category, please do not treat airport travel as routine. The risk is real enough that you should speak with counsel before you make any travel plans. Number 2. Another group that may be affected is people who are in removal proceedings. That means you do not yet have a final removal order, but your immigration case is actively pending before the court. You might be waiting on relief, an asylum case, cancellation of removal, or some other kind of case, and you may think that because you are still fighting your case, travel is harmless. However, that is not always true. If you are in removal proceedings, you can still be referred for extra review. TSA officers and airport screening systems can trigger additional checks, and that can lead to secondary inspection, where immigration authorities may become involved. Even if you have a pending petition or a filing in progress, you still need to be cautious. If an officer does not understand your case, or if the situation is not immediately clear in the records they are seeing, you may be delayed, questioned, or potentially prevented from continuing your trip. In a worst-case scenario, you could miss your flight and be taken into further immigration review. So if you are in removal proceedings, I would strongly urge you not to assume that a domestic ticket means safe travel. In many cases, it is better to get legal advice first and understand your exact position before you go anywhere near the airport. Number 3. Green card holders are another group that needs a closer look. Now, if you are a lawful permanent resident with no criminal history, no immigration violations, no prior removal order, and no unresolved issues, you are generally in a much better position to travel. If you are approached, you can present your valid green card and explain your status. That said, even green card holders should still travel with their documents and be prepared. But if you are a green card holder with a criminal history, this is where things become more complicated. Certain convictions can create immigration consequences, including some offenses that may be viewed seriously under immigration law. If you have a criminal record, especially if you were convicted of an offense that could create an immigration issue, and you have never resolved that issue with an immigration judge or an attorney, you should talk to your lawyer before you travel. The same caution applies if you are a conditional permanent resident. Conditional residents who are waiting on an extension, a petition to remove conditions, or who have a case that has been delayed for a long time, may want to be especially careful. If your case has been flagged, if there are concerns about missing evidence, or if there is any issue that could be interpreted as inconsistent information, that can lead to more questions. In other words, if you are a green card holder with no problems, you are generally in a safer category. But if you have criminal convictions, unresolved immigration issues, or conditional status with possible case concerns, it may not be worth the risk of traveling until you have legal guidance. And last but not least, number 4 is non-immigrant visa holders who may be subject to secondary inspection. This group includes people on visiting visas and other temporary visas, And in some situations, even if you are legally present, there can still be extra scrutiny. For example, if you are close to the end of your permitted stay, or if your travel pattern raises questions, or if you have had any problems while you have been in the United States, you may be asked more detailed questions. If there are issues involving your visa terms, your stated purpose of travel, or other inconsistencies, you could be referred for extra review. Social media activity can also create concerns if what you post appears to contradict the purpose of your trip or raises questions about your intentions. That does not mean every post will cause a problem, but it does mean you should be aware that online content can become part of a broader review. If you are arriving internationally on a non-immigrant visa, there may be even more scrutiny because Customs and Border Protection may compare your answers, your application, and the details of your prior interview. If anything does not line up, you may be sent for further questioning, or in some cases, denied entry and placed on the next available flight back. So whether you are traveling domestically or entering the country internationally, if you are a visa holder with potential issues, you need to take that seriously. So how did we even get to this point? How did airport enforcement become such a big issue? Well, at one point, there was a partial government shutdown, and that created major staffing problems at airports. TSA personnel were not being paid, and there were reports of long delays, stressed workers, and people struggling to keep operations moving. When airport lines grew longer and the situation became more chaotic, the government brought in additional federal personnel to help with logistics, crowd flow, and general airport operations. The idea was to keep the airport functioning and help manage the load, not to replace TSA officers or make everyone's travel experience harder. But once immigration enforcement personnel are present, that naturally increases the likelihood that some travelers will be referred to additional review. Since the beginning of this year, there has also been a greater level of coordination between immigration enforcement and airport screening in some locations, which means TSA officers may refer a traveler to secondary inspection if something appears unusual or if a record raises questions. That has made many people feel more exposed, because airports are places where people generally expect to move quickly and without incident. The reality now is that immigration-related screening can be part of the airport process in certain places, and that is why people need to be prepared. The next big question is whether that presence will continue. As of now, things have started to calm down somewhat at some airports, but officials have said that the presence may remain until it is no longer needed. In other words, even when airport operations feel more normal, the enforcement presence may not disappear immediately. Airports are simply one of the easiest places for authorities to identify people, confirm documents, and address cases that may need further review. That is why people need to stop assuming that airport travel is low risk just because they have a ticket and a boarding pass. The reality is that airports can become a place where identity, immigration status, and travel purpose are all reviewed very quickly. And if you do not have your paperwork in order, or if your case has unresolved issues, that can lead to trouble. Right now, some of the airports that have been reported to have a heavier immigration enforcement presence include Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, Chicago, Cleveland, Houston, New York, New Orleans, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Fort Myers, Pittsburgh, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. I have also personally seen increased enforcement activity in JFK in New York. So if you are traveling through one of those airports, you should be especially careful. That does not mean everyone will be stopped. It does not mean everyone will have a problem. But it does mean that if you fall into one of the higher risk categories I just described, you should not ignore the possibility of extra screening. So what should you do if you are at the airport and immigration authorities approach you? First, before you even get to the airport, you need to plan ahead. If you are an immigrant, a permanent resident, a conditional resident, or someone with a pending case, you need to make sure your documents are ready. If you are a green card holder, carry your physical green card if you have it. If you do not have the card with you, at least have a clear copy or a picture of it saved in a secure place, but the actual card is best. If you are a conditional green card holder, carry your conditional card and any extension notice you have received. If your status has been extended while a case is pending, keep that paperwork with you. If you are on a work-based visa, a student visa, a training visa, or any other non-immigrant status, Bring documents that support your current status, such as an employment verification letter, a school letter, an I-20, a work contract, or any other record that shows you are still within the rules of your visa. And before you travel, make sure you know the exact status of your immigration case. If you have anything pending, if there is any history of removal proceedings, or if you think something may have been filed but never fully resolved, talk to your immigration attorney before you head to the airport. Preparation can save you a lot of stress, and it can help you avoid being caught off guard. If an immigration officer or another federal officer does speak with you, stay calm and polite. You can ask whether you are free to leave. That is a reasonable question to ask when you are being stopped or questioned, and it helps you understand whether the interaction is voluntary or whether they are treating it as a formal stop. If they tell you that you are free to go, you may leave. If they continue to question you, keep your answers brief and do not volunteer extra information. You also have the right to remain silent, in the sense that you do not have to engage in extended questioning beyond what is necessary to identify yourself, especially if you are worried that your answers could create confusion or put your status at risk. That said, always be respectful and do not argue. The goal is not to escalate the situation. The goal is to protect yourself and get legal help if needed. And this is very important. Do not sign anything you do not understand. If you are ever asked to sign a form, a statement, or any immigration-related document, read it carefully and make sure you know what it means. If you do not understand the document, ask for clarification and, if possible, speak to your attorney before signing. A signature can have major consequences, so do not rush. If you are detained or placed into secondary inspection, treat that as a serious legal matter and contact your lawyer as soon as you can. You should not feel pressured to agree to something simply because an officer is asking you to. I had a client who got caught up in exactly this kind of situation. He had a valid work permit and a valid ID, but his case was in removal proceedings. Everything had been filed properly, and he believed that because his paperwork was in order, he would not have any issue traveling. He had already booked the trip, and he decided not to check in with my office first. When he arrived at the airport, he went to the kiosk to check in, because he had not been able to check in online. He tried a few times, but the system would not complete the process. An airline agent came over to help him, and then the agent realized something was unusual. She stepped away, and when she returned, she came back with an immigration officer. At that point, he was taken aside, and the situation escalated quickly. It was unfortunate, but it shows how fast things can change once you are in the airport system and an issue is identified. Even if you think you have the right documents, if your immigration status is complicated, the airport may not be the place to test that assumption. So please, take this seriously. If you are undocumented, if you have a removal order, if you are in removal proceedings, if you are a green card holder with a criminal history or unresolved immigration issues, or if you are a visa holder with possible secondary inspection concerns, do not just hope for the best. Get your documents together. Review your status. Speak with your immigration attorney. And if you are already at the airport and you are approached, stay calm. Ask whether you are free to leave. Keep your answers short, and do not sign anything without understanding it. I hope this helped you understand the current situation a little better and gave you practical information you can actually use. I am Immigration Attorney Zubair. If this video was helpful, please like, share, subscribe, and comment.